we're recording right now. So what's up, everyone? I'm here with Johannes, and he is a kind of long-time friend of mine now from Twitter, type Twitter right now. And right now, we are about to have a profiling session with him. And Johannes, this is pretty much just going to be me asking you a series of questions. A lot of them are also going to be follow-up questions. There's no really like a right or wrong answer, just as long as it's honest about how you feel about whatever question might be. So I think, and then at the end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you what type I think that you are based off of all the answers that you gave me, and you're the one who confirms whether it's right or wrong, because my job is to just make sure that you understand my reasoning and what the functions actually mean, etc., from at least my school of thought. And then you can like, oh, I think that you misheard this, or actually let me clarify this, and then we come to whatever type that you might be. Sounds good?
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. My first question for you is, what is it that you love to do? And when I say that you love to do, I mean that you love to do so much that you would continue doing it, and the only reason why you'd stop is because you're exhausted. Otherwise, you'd go on indefinitely.
Reading, for one, definitely. Writing, if what I'm writing about is something like, yes, writing, but not just writing about anything. I recently took down my socionics website because I'm not interested in writing about it. But if I'm writing, there are some nights I've sat up until 1 to just to write poetry until I almost fall asleep. I've been writing my emails. I've been writing like topics of archetypes, of philosophy, of mythology would fall into that category. Something else I would do until I can't do it anymore, and do regularly until I can't do it anymore, is play rugby.
Rugby.
Which like it is exhausting when you do it, so you can't do it forever. It's
Right.
pretty. You come to a stop, and then it's like not possible to continue anymore.
For sure, but if you had the ability to continue like indefinitely, then you would.
I probably would.
Nice.
Yes, but not if that would be like, I wouldn't do it indefinitely because I wouldn't want it to be the only thing I do.
Of course, yeah. We don't want.
Whereas with writing, reading actually as well, reading or writing, I could probably, if that would be the only thing I would do, I could still probably be content with that.
Okay. What types of things do you like to read about?
Fiction mostly. I did have span of time of 2 years or so where I read a lot of nonfiction, productivity things, things like that. But I've moved over to reading a lot more fiction, and not because I'm not interested in the productivity or improvement that comes with nonfiction books, but because I see those parts. I think those parts are better conveyed through fiction in many cases, where a book can be philosophical, or how mythology and stories can tell us about like the nature of what it is to be human.
Right. Got you.
And then I read a lot. Not a lot anymore, but I do read Jung quite a bit. I want to read more philosophy, and I do read some, even if it's not enough.
Cool. What is it that you like about writing poetry? Like, when did you start doing that?
The first poem I wrote, if we disregard the ones like in high school mandatory writing, because that was just I did because I had to, and then I didn't think about it for years. But then this summer, I wait, yeah, last summer I did write a poem, because it was sort of an accident. It was the only way I could express my emotions in that moment. So I wrote a poem as like this was the only source of expression I had, and then I liked it. I've always, maybe not always, but I've for a long time liked stringing words together in a way that makes them have more impact or sound beautiful, or like just playing with words is fun and useful. So I enjoy doing that, and then pouring the emotions into them and expressing emotions and emotions and feelings that I had in a way that I couldn't do otherwise.
Gotcha.
And then it sort of snowballed until I started doing it more. And now I do it either for expressing emotions or to explore a different viewpoint or to tell a story through poetry.
Cool. That's really awesome. And then lastly, rugby. So what is it that you like so much about rugby? And this pen is unreliable, so I'm going to roll back, but I'm listening to you.
Why do I enjoy rugby? One part is definitely the sort of physical exhaustion that comes with a contact sport, and the intense focus that is needed on the field. I did wrestling for a year in high school, and one of the initial positives that came with rugby was a similar one that I had in wrestling, that I couldn't, while wrestling, while playing rugby, I can't be thinking about anything else than what's physically, like what I'm physically doing. Because if even a portion of my mind is thinking about something else, I'll get smashed and end up on the ground. And that hurts. So I can't do that. So it sort of forces me to turn off the constant thinking about things.
Gotcha.
Another reason that I started playing rugby was quite simply to hang out with the friends, because I had one friend that invited me and another to like try the sport out at one point, and then I got stuck.
Nice. Cool. All right. Well, that was actually really helpful. Moving on to the next question. If I were to go to maybe like 2 to 3 of your best friends, and I was like, hey, I'm profiling Johannes, and I'm just trying to understand, him from his own perspective, and then him from other people's perspective, and, what's in between. What do you think that your friends would say about you? You can even feel free to imitate them if you want. Even things that you may disagree with.
Definitely that I'm focused on philosophy, of trying to understand things. He doesn't count as a close friend, but my parents met one of my teachers when I was, could have been 13, and he asked him what, like, normal interaction, what's he doing now, blah blah, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And when they said I studied philosophy, he was like, yeah, of course he is, that makes sense. And this was when I was 13, long before I got, like, I barely knew what philosophy was. But that's something my close friends would definitely say as well. they probably, at least some of them, not all of them, I think, but some of them would probably comment on me having a serious and to the point personality, which I both disagree and agree with.
Okay.
Because I think I do have, this is something I've thought of recently, so it might bias the answer a bit. So it might not actually be something that would come up, but it's something I've thought of recently, so it's on top of my mind. But I think I do have a serious personality. I'm quite often like focused to the point sort of thing, but I think people perceive me as more serious than I am. Whereas I think it takes not certain personalities, but a certain closeness for me to be entirely open and joking about. Not that it's an insane amount of closeness that is required, but it's not how I behave when I meet new people most of the time.
Gotcha.
They'd probably describe me as like I said, philosophical, thinking about things. Probably being a caring, understanding person when someone's going through something. Probably that I'm diplomatic, and that I can explain what one person is saying to another, and in that bridge a conflict of sorts.
Gotcha. Nice. Cool. All right. So now my next question for you would be for you to describe yourself in the same manner. So this could be things that you disagreed with from the previous list, or this could be, like things like you repeating from the previous list. Like actually, they would describe me in this way, and I actually do agree. Like one of the things I already wrote down because you were a little bit ahead of the game was you said that you're serious, but you think that people think that you're more serious than you actually are. And that was like actually very helpful. And we're going to dig a little bit more into that too. But is there anything else that you would like? How would you describe yourself?
Definitely philosophical. Definitely contemplative, thinking about things. I think one thing that would differ is that people would focus on the idea aspect, the logical logos aspect of that. I think most of my friends would, whereas I would, in that as a sort of counterpoint and addition, add the poetry aspect, where I think those two go together, but sort of represent two different sides of a coin, and that people, especially the people in real life that I don't have on Twitter, only see the logos part, where they don't see the poetry I write. It's just a philosophy, it's just ideas.
Right.
And not the exploration of emotion and I don't want to say intuitive, because intuitive in this context would mean intuition as in type, but intuitive in a non-logical understanding.
Got you. Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense.
I think I would emphasize more the emotional understanding and sometimes sensitive part of me than other people would, to a large extent because I don't show it, and that's something I'm passively trying to work on in a way. It's not something I actively work on, but it's something I would want to be different in. And it's sort of like I'm working on it under the surface. It's sort of passively growing.
Gotcha. Do you think?
Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Another thing I would use to describe myself, and this is, it's not. I would use the big five openness to describe myself. A lot, both to like intellectual openness to ideas, but also to art or things like that. I think if I were to, this is not a question, I'm inventing it, but if I were to describe myself as one of the traits in Big Five, I'd use the openness. I think that builds up quite big part of my personality.
Gotcha. So referring back to how you said that you think that people think that you're more serious than you really are, do you, does that make you feel any type of way? Like, does that bother you in any way? Or is it just like
to some degree, I know that I'm responsible for it myself. That I portray myself in a more serious way. So I only have myself to blame. Well, I mostly have myself to blame for it. But it also annoys me to an extent because it's like it's almost like I'm put in this label that I don't belong in. And that can, to an extent, inhibit how I behave. And how, like, if people expect me to behave in a certain way, the whole conversation or the whole interaction is flavored by that. And because of that, like, my ability to be myself in that situation is inhibited by the flavor of the context. So it's annoying, it can be tiring, but I have myself to blame for it as well.
Got you. No, that totally makes sense. Like, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's kind of like a spectrum that you want to feel more free to explore, not even explore, but it's you. So you want to feel more free to go to any side of the spectrum whenever you like, whatever situation, but people, because they expect you to remain in one area of the spectrum, then you feel this external pressure to kind of stay there, whether you want to or not in more situations. Is that right?
Yeah.
Got you. Yeah.
That's right.
I think that I kind of have like the reverse problem, or had. I've also been working on that, where it's like, because I'm used to being seen as like happy, cheery, whatever, then the times when I'm like more serious, so are you high? Are you sleepy? Is something wrong? Are you sad? Why? Like, I'm not sad. Like, I just don't. But then I force myself to be more cheery or like more something, so that they won't have to ask me if I'm okay. Like, why did you respond in that way? Are you upset with me? I'm not upset. I just, so yeah.
Like,
that.
People make a big deal of what they don't expect me to be.
Yeah.
When I am what I don't expect to be, people make a big deal of it. And then I'm just annoyed by them making a big deal of it. So I inhibit myself so that they won't make a big deal of it next time.
Yes. Yeah, I totally get you. I'm on board with that. Got you. Okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being that it's the hardest, and then 1 being that it's the easiest, how difficult was it for you to see how others see you? Or like describe how others see you?
Good question. I have a harder time with this question than I had coming up with what other people would see me as. Um, it wasn't that hard, but it's not like it's not natural to think of it in that way either. I don't want to say that it's not natural to think of how people think of me, because that wouldn't be true. But I think it was the describe me aspect that made it more complicated. 10 was
the hardest.
Probably I want to say 5, but I also don't want to, because that's like just in the middle answer. But I would probably have to say 5.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool.
It's like not super hard, but it wasn't something I knew in an instant either.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. And for yourself, how would you describe, I mean, like, how difficult was that for you to describe how you view yourself? 10 being the hardest.
Easier, but also not like I knew exactly what to say, because it's hard to put the entirety of it in a few words. And it's hard to know what to emphasize. Like, and that, I think that was an issue with the friends question as well. Like, there's all these aspects that could be expressed, which are the most important ones, which are the key points of how my friends view me and how I view myself. But I'd probably put it as a 3, I think. It's a bit easier, but...
Gotcha. Cool. All right, so now my next question. How were you like as a child? And then also your, if you can describe or throw in there your family dynamic.
What age is child in this context? Because I think I changed, changed direction pretty much for some.
I'd actually love to hear that development.
Okay.
Yeah. But first, but before that, how would you describe your family dynamic? So, like, any siblings, and then how did you get along with your parents, and then go into, the development of like, oh, when I was younger, I was like this, I was a school bully, and then I became this Zen master.
Family dynamic. I have a sister that is 1 year younger than me. We lived sort of not secluded, but we lived away from any, we lived on my mother's uncle's farm and rented a house there. So it was sort of away from everything. It was a 10-minute by car to the school I went to, which was like 40 minutes with bus. So a lot of the childhood was just me and my sister, without like friends close by. We moved when I was 9, 10. But before that, it was my sister and I, and we got along real well. She was a friend. My parents sort of forced that friendship sometimes. And made us spend time together. But the dynamic was with her was good. Um, the dynamic with my parents was good as well.
Nice.
My dad studied for the first years, um, and then he started working. My mom was working at first, but then she was working, and we went with her to work. Um, I didn't do any I didn't do any school or any sort of child care thing until I was 6,
Okay.
where that's where the school system starts. So before that, it was my sister and I, and either we were home or we went with one of our parents to work, because they could bring us sometimes, especially my mom. But the dynamic was good. Um, I think the overall dynamic, I'm trying to avoid using type or functions to describe things because it is a typing, but
If
I
you,
think the best way I
yeah.
can describe this
Mm-hmm.
is that my parents they expected me to grow up as an SFJ, and they raised me in such a way, as
And
well as raising my sister in such a way. So it was very, if I'm using socionics terms, it was very judicious, so like any SI and feeling sort of environment to grow up in.
mm,
Um,
how would you describe growing up or being raised as an SFJ? Like, what does that mean to you?
at first, it wasn't a problem. Perhaps because they didn't do it perhaps they didn't emphasize it as much when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just do my personality when I was a kid, and then I'll go into that when I come to the change I went through?
Yeah, absolutely.
As a kid, as a child,
Mm-hmm.
I was curious about everything. I started reading fairly early. I had a comment, just the last couple of years, I've become friends with someone that was a librarian in the school when I was a kid. And she made a comment a few years ago that in the first grade, I came to the library wanting to borrow nonfiction books about, I don't know, stuff that I wanted to learn about, when people in my class were still attempting to put together proper sentences in reading and writing. And I think that was it can be used to define my childhood almost. My parents always encouraged reading, helped me get a library card pretty early.
Nice.
I borrowed books from my grandparents all the time.
Nice.
I took home the history book in 4th grade because it was fun.
Yes. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, history was fun. I read a lot. I think that might have been a consequence from not living away from all my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't hang out with them all the time, and even as we moved closer, it was still. I've always lived outside of the town, even when we moved to it.
Mm.
So even then, I was further away from people. So reading became normal. That's what I did. So I think if I would define that era of how I was, it would be curious. Very much more open with emotions as well, more heart on the sleeve.
Mm.
I wouldn't call myself reserved at all at that time. I wouldn't call myself cold in any way. Much more enthusiastic, much more like, how should I describe it? Curious, like extroverted, extroverted with an O, like extroverted in the typical sense of the word, where it's not type related, like the common understanding of it.
For sure. And you said that was like around what age?
That was up until 12, I think. And from, I don't know, when I started having memories. But after 12, I don't know exactly why, but I gradually, or 11, 12, somewhere around that. And around the time I started graduating towards more reserved, more reserved, bottling up my emotions, not being as expressive. I still read a lot. I didn't stop doing that. I was much more withdrawn from other people. Much less risk taking in friendships and such. Like when I was a kid, I would just throw myself around in a sense. But when I got a bit older, I withdrew from that. I had a hard time making friends in general. Didn't have a lot of friends in school. Had some, but not a lot. And I think this is where the issues of being raised as an SFJ when I wasn't started coming in.
Okay.
Because there was a clear difference between the rest of my family and I. In that they were naturally more expressive, more enthusiastic, more inclined to follow along with the mood of the what was going on. Whereas I rejected that. And then at, 16 or 17, I discovered MBTI. I was told I was an ESTJ, and I went into that with all my heart. Like, I made myself into the stereotype of an ESTJ. And I think I did that as a counter reaction to my family.
Yeah.
As they expected all this FE, all the feeling, which I didn't relate to. So in that, I counterreacted. I went in the opposite direction, and I made myself into a stereotype ESTJ that wouldn't care about emotion at all. So I very much.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead. Finish that.
I very much repressed my own emotions. I didn't give enough focus or attention on the emotions of other people. Not that I was necessarily mean to people, because I think with how I was raised and with how I am as a person, that just didn't cross my mind almost. But there was still a disregard towards other people's emotions. And through this, my dad was always, "No, you're not like this. Like you are more caring than you express." And I was very much, "No, I'm not. You're wrong." But it turned out he was right.
Wow.
And then after high school, 19 and onwards, I think I started going away from the stereotype and going more into who I am now.
What would you say is the difference
between now and the ESTJ stereotype me?
Yeah.
Huge. I don't even know where to start. Well, we can start with the emotional part. I repressed all emotions, both my own and others, and those of others. Whereas now, that is, I'm still not a super expressive person. I can still have trouble identifying and expressing my own emotions, but I place a lot more value on them now than I did when I was a late teenager. I'm a lot more open to and inclined to like fly away with abstract ideas. I've written articles about. There's specifically one article that showed me very explicitly the contrast, where I wrote about astrology and alchemy after having read a book by Jung. And the very fact that I was even open to discussing those ideas is huge different from how I was in high school. I was very much an empirical, like the empirical is all that exists, almost kind of person. What we can observe, what we can't rationalize, what we can't prove, doesn't exist or isn't important. Whereas after that moved from what we can prove isn't important. Like it's all those other things that matters.
Just so I'm clear, during that stage where you were like, oh, well, we can't prove what's not necessarily able to go through the scientific method or, just objective, not in the Jungian sense, whatever I mean. Was that during your ESTJ emo phase?
Yeah.
Okay. So would you say that was like a little bit more conscious? Like that was you trying to kind of fit the ESTJ, or maybe part of that really was, no, I really actually believe that until you can prove this is invalid?
I'm not sure. It might have been a part of the ESTJ, like trying to become an ESTJ, but if it was very internalized.
Okay.
Like I did really believe that what we could prove, what we could empirically observe, was all that mattered. I really did believe that, but looking back and looking at my whole life as if I look at the trends throughout my life,
right,
it was probably an internalization of it. Because if I look both before and after, both as a kid and now, that's not how I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that for sure. That makes sense. All right. So we kind of pretty much already dug into this next question, but just in case, and just so I'm sure I'm marking all of my ground, can you describe your relationship with your emotions currently?
Not really.
You like metaphor, so maybe this might help. Put it this way: your emotions, like literally or figuratively, but literally, your emotions as a woman that, like, is she interested in you? Are you interested in her? Are you pursuing her? Is she annoying to you that she keeps like, Johannes, take me out on a date? guys hang out, and then it's like, oh, we hang out, seldomly. She's all right, but, know what I mean? Maybe that might help. And if not, then totally disregard that.
I think I'm drawn to my emotion. They're not foreign, but they don't always act in a way I want them to act. Like, I don't know. With emotion, my instant connection to it is, I for some reason don't include joy and anger in the emotions. I don't know why. It's just when I hear emotion, it's sort of this constant state of feeling emotions, whereas joy and anger, I guess, are more in my instinctive reaction expressions.
I could see that.
And if I were to describe my relationship to those expressions, I wouldn't know how to describe it. Like, well, yeah, actually, when it comes to expressing joy and anger and things like that, I do feel them, but I inhibit my expression of them. In part because of what we talked about earlier with the expectations that people have and like how they would react to the expressions. So they wouldn't just react to the emotions I express, or they would even less react to the emotions I express and more to the fact that I express emotions. And then it would feel like the emotions aren't seen or aren't like they don't see my emotions, so I might as well not express them. If all they will focus on is the fact that I express my emotions, then I might as well not do it. I'm much more drawn to feeling emotions now than I was when I was pretending to be an ESTJ.
Right.
Like, whereas I would repress the feeling, try to get away from it, I now rather want to stay in it, even if it's some versions of negative emotions. It's something that I want to stay in and like feel through the entire emotion rather than pushing it away or pushing through it.
Cool. Sorry, just give me a moment. That was a lot. That was really rich. I'm glad I still asked that question. Okay. Cool. So my next question for you is, how would you describe your relationship with your body? And again, you kind of touched on this with I have a body.
I think I have one.
You think you have one? Okay.
Actually, I don't. That's one thing I have. Like, I don't relate to the whole thing. Wait, I have a body. Like, of course, I know that I have one. That's not. But being asked how I would describe my relationship to my body is harder. Because I don't see myself as having a relationship to it. It just is there. It's good to have one.
Mm-hmm.
It helps move me around.
It helps move you around.
It does. It does.
Yeah, just a little bit.
A little bit. I mean, I guess the only connection I can make from it, or like the only way I can talk about it, is like how I approach it in regards to rugby.
Yeah.
Before I played rugby, well, in my early teens, I did work out some, but nothing major. Then I didn't do it at all until I started wrestling, and that was fun. But it wasn't removed from the body, because of course wrestling can't be removed from the body. You're using all of it, but the body wasn't the purpose of wrestling. The purpose of wrestling was to exhaust myself and to get this separation from the constant thoughts that I had through an activity that was fun.
Huh.
When it comes to rugby, it's not quite the same, because that I don't know. Then I didn't work out at all, or like care. I barely cared about my body for 2 years, maybe, until I started playing rugby. Then I started going to the gym because I was too tiny to play rugby otherwise. So it was very much of like starting to work out, starting to eat more properly was very much utilitarian approach. It was very much for the purpose of being able to play rugby because I enjoyed that.
Wow.
I don't think I would stop doing it now if I stopped playing rugby, or I know I wouldn't, because, like, I guess to an extent I see the body as a tool, and it's better to me to have a good tool than to have one that's falling apart.
That's a great thought.
Plus, I like enjoy it. I enjoy playing rugby. I enjoy going to the gym to work out, to exhaust myself, things like that. One thing that might be useful is with rugby, there's a lot of contact, there's a lot of tackling, and unlike American football, we don't have all the protection. What we have is the mouth guard. Yeah. So after games, even after practices, it'll be like I scratched my leg, I got stepped on, I got tackled, and now my whole left side is hurting. Things like that will happen semi-regularly.
Right.
The first practice I had, I got home and my entire body was in pain because I was unused to it. And like as time went on, I got a bit more used to it, but it's still like this autumn, I think throughout I had some pain in some body part, almost throughout the entire autumn, every day. And this is where I'm going at. The pain is there, but it's not. It's a slight annoyance that I have a pain in my foot, but it's not something that takes over all my mind.
For sure. For sure.
It's more of a. It's more of a oh right, and my foot's hurting. I would call my parents to talk about something, and they would ask like, "Oh, how are you? How's school? How's rugby? Blah blah." And almost as an afterthought, I went, "Oh," and I can't walk properly because my leg's hurting. So I guess that ties into the relationship to the body and how it's not something I focus on.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely get that. Okay. Um, your relationship with your body versus your relationship with your feelings. Who would you say you're more close to?
Feelings, definitely.
Hmm.
Both more close.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Both more close to and more appreciative of, more drawn to. Like I said, my body is a utilitarian. It's a tool, whereas my emotions is like what matters.
Gotcha.
Almost like emotions is probably one of the things that matters the most. Whereas the body is, it doesn't matter beyond what it can provide for life in general. The feelings is an end in itself, whereas the body isn't.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. So, oh, kind of freezing up. Wait till you're back. Okay. All right. I think you're back now. All right. So, my next question to you is unstable. Okay, cool. Sorry, just kept on messing up for a little bit. But my next question to you is, what would you say is something that's very obvious to you, but is not as obvious to other people? Like things that you keep on
In terms of myself, or in terms of like anything?
anything. Kind of like, how is everyone not
Anything.
doing this? You know, you're just constantly noticing the people.
Okay. I'm sort of internally debating whether to talk about this or not, because I don't want to get into a debate about it, which I would do if I talk about it. But you could cut things from the video, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, sweet. Another thing that I feel like I do better than other people is understand their intentions and motivations with something, and I'm able to translate that to another person almost.
That's a really good.
I did point to it in when I was talking. If it was other people or myself, describe myself. Being diplomatic and being able to put things, take what someone says and put it in a way that makes another person understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I've countless times I've had debates between friends that are like heated debates where they really can't see where the other person is coming from. They almost like they start raising their voices at each other, and I'll go, "You're saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're just coming from entirely different angles."
Right.
I had an ISTP and an ENFP debate something, and they like started raising the voice, started getting angry because they couldn't see where the other person was coming from. And then this was really useful knowing MBTI as well in doing this, because I could see where the thought were coming from and then put it in a way, like say the ENFP, she was describing something, I could see where what she was saying was coming from in the NEFI. And then I could take that and put it in a way that would make sense to TISE.
Right.
And the conflict, like the conflict wasn't like they were still annoyed at each other, but they could still see each other point.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this isn't just the ISTP ENFP context. I've done this with plenty of people.
Mm-hmm.
I've done this with my family a lot, and I've joked with them, and they joke back that when I was about to move away, like, how are we gonna do this when you move away? We're not gonna understand each other. And I had my friends say something similar as well, where I did message you about this. And a couple of other people. I had a couple of friends getting married last year, and before that, I wanted to write the small list of things to think about towards the, like, when they got married. Think about in regards to the other person, to like help them communicate with each other.
Right.
Because leading up to it, and not as much afterwards, but leading up to it, there had been several times where they had gotten into conflicts or just plainly not understood each other, because they were speaking from different angles.
Right.
And I could come in and say, well, this is what she's saying, this is what he's trying to convey, and that could help them like solve the conflict.
Gotcha.
One example is that we were hanging out, the two of them and one more friend and I, and they hadn't met for like a few days. And the woman that got married said something like, "I'll go get this. You want to come along to the guy that married her?" And he was like, "Nah, you can probably do it by yourself. It's fine." And I was like, I had to push him to like, no, she's trying to say, come with me. I want to spend some alone time with you this week. Like, I had to tell that to him and like, go with her. She's not asking you to help her carry an umbrella. She can do that. She's asking you to spend time with her.
Mm-hmm.
And like those kind of things are reoccurring, where I see the motivation, I see the intention of what someone is trying to say, and then I can translate that to what another person will understand.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. You're gonna make for a great husband one day. That's good. What is
in that area? Although I think I'm slightly worried, like I'm better at that when it's not including myself. I don't think I'm bad at it when it comes to myself, but I have an easier time doing it when it's
involving
other people. Yeah.
I see. That's interesting. My next question for you, well, it's kind of the second part of this question. And by the way, we're almost done, so just so you know, just maybe like just a couple more that I'm gonna get through. But so what is something that's usually obvious to other people that seems to just always go over your head? Wait, y'all all knew this? How am I always not seeing this? This one by nature is, of course, a bit more difficult.
Yeah, I usually don't see what I don't see.
Right.
I almost want to say the same thing as I did on the other one, but it's not quite the same. But I can be very oblivious to how people interact when I'm not focusing on it. Like, if it's in my immediate circle, or if I'm focused on it, I think I'm fairly good at reading people, their intentions, their motivations, where they focus their attention. But if I don't focus on it, I'll like have no idea what's going on.
Why do you think that is?
I guess it's like I see the part that I focus on, but it's not like it's like a focused light rather than light that goes everywhere, sort of
Got
thing.
Okay.
Um,
I get what you mean now.
and I think that also applies to like what people would do, what people are doing, what's going on around me. I'll not necessarily see that unless I focus on it.
Okay.
I'll also be like, I was having, this was before the whole Corona thing, but I was a bit more tired than I usually was, and we were having a sprinting session at the rugby pitch. So I went there. I didn't have breakfast because I didn't have time. This was in the early-ish morning. So I went there, and we were like 10 people running around. And after some time, I'm like, I have a headache. Why do I have a headache? I usually don't get a headache from just this little running.
Right.
But like, I realized that, oh, wait, I haven't been drinking enough. That's probably it. So I do that. I go get a protein bar and drink of some sorts. Eat that before I go to the gym. I work out. I realize that I'm a bit more tired than usual. Oh, I wonder why this is blah blah. But I carry on, not thinking more of it. Then I get home and I realize that I'm getting sick. And after that, I had to lie in bed for like a week. Because I've been having a fever, or the starting to develop a fever, when I went to the rugby sprinting session. I had a headache because I was sick, and I didn't realize it until I got home and like couldn't move around.
Gotcha.
Whereas when I told that to other people, they're like, "You had a headache? How would?" Like they didn't get how I didn't realize I was sick.
Right.
And this has happened several times.
Gotcha.
I did this. The first time I can remember was when in high school when I did wrestling. I just started wrestling, and it's like cold, autumn, rainy. I'm walking around in shoes with holes in, so my feet are wet the entire day. I have sort of a cold, but not really. So I go to wrestling and I end up being sick for a few days, fever, because I went to wrestling when I was sick. That's something that happens.
Wow. Got you. That checks out. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna skip that one because I feel like we already covered that. Okay. All right, so we have 2 and maybe just a half of a question left. I'm trying to see how to order it. Okay.
Curious about that half question.
Right. What would you say is the biggest lesson that you had to learn the hard way?
It seems obvious now, but at the time it was hard to internalize. And that was the breaking point when I went from emotions are bad to maybe I should accept my emotions. And it was I'm not entirely sure this was the reason, but when I was 18, must have been, I applied to the military. I didn't get in.
Mm,
They First they had an intelligence test of sorts. Then they had a psychologist, and if I would have passed that, I would have gone to a physical test. But I didn't pass the psychologist, and I think that was because I repressed my emotions and I didn't have enough consideration of other people's emotions.
mm,
And they caught that in like questions of how would you act if scenario.
wow.
Um, and like I don't blame them. I wouldn't have let myself in either. But that was a sort of wake up call to maybe it isn't such a good thing. A lot because the military had been my like it had been what I'd wanted to do for at least 2 years at that point. I was like, this is the plan I have for my future. This is what I will do.
Mm,
And it all came crashing down to like, nope, I'm not going to do that.
wow.
Huh. Um, that was probably the lesson I had to learn the hard way. That seems really obvious if I look at it now. Like, of course, I can't repress my emotions.
Yeah, got you. Got you. Got you. That's good. Okay, so the second question is having to do with alone time. So I'm about to throw super extreme examples at you, and it's not necessarily what you will answer, it's why you'll answer, as with most of these questions have been. But yeah, so extreme example: a month in a home full of lots of people, all of which you love, sure, but like you're full with you don't get any alone time except for maybe when you're asleep. The moment that you wake back up, you're conscious of being awake, and you're right back in the midst of all of them, and you don't get any alone time for that whole month while you're with them. Versus a month on an island, completely separated from people, but you have all of your resources. However, you can't be you cannot what's the word, you can't interact with people. Like there's no Zoom, there's no texting, none of that. Just a whole month of you just not interacting with people at all, but you have your resources and books and stuff like that. Which one is more of a nightmare to you?
The people one, definitely. If I have books and if I have a pen and a lot of papers, I'll be fine. Well, I'd still want to interact with people, but that could cover my basic needs for a month. If I would be, what I would miss around if I'd be around people all the time would be the time to read, the time to write, the time to contemplate things. And that, like, if I would still, I wouldn't have a problem doing that around people if it's in a context where the other people or the other person or very few people would be doing similar things.
Right.
Like they'd also be in a like I could definitely sit and read with a couple of other people or
Okay.
sit and write when other people are there. So if non-interaction is a possibility with the other people, that wouldn't be as much of an issue.
Okay.
But the problem comes if I don't have time to sit down and read, sit down and write, sit down and think and contemplate about things.
Got you. what would be, or how hard would it be to be on the island without the people? Is that something that you're like, that'd be an escape, like, yeah, I'll be back in a month, no problem? Or is it like,
It would
that'd be really difficult? Sure, I have my books, but
it wouldn't be like it wouldn't be fun to get away. It wouldn't be something I'd look forward to. But it's not a huge sacrifice to make, at least if it's just a month and I know that I'll return to other people. Then it's like I can use this month. I can read a lot. I can focus on reading, writing, working out, like all of those things I want to do that I enjoy doing, and that I sometimes find myself not being able to do as much as I want to do.
gotcha.
So it would be something I would see as positive, but not something I would choose myself.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. And let me just make sure. I think that my last question. Okay. Yeah. My last question for you would be, and this one is kind of like a two-parter too. So the first part of the question, and this part we can also edit out if we need to. The first part of the question is, what would you say is or are some controversial opinions that you have, like some of the most controversial opinions that you have? And the second one would be, would you say that your thoughts define you, who you are?
First controversial opinion, like, yeah, it's probably controversial that America is a very collectivistic country.
Very what country?
Collectivistic.
Got you.
Like not at all as individualistic as it wants to be perceived.
Do you want this edited out, by the way? Or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, gotcha.
I'll let you know if I do
Okay.
later on. America's collectivistic. What else? I don't know. Controversial to me would mean that people would be outraged and annoyed at it. Like people would react to it. And I feel like most of my opinions, even if they aren't what most people would say, but they're also not what people would be outraged about.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I mean, I probably have some that I can't think of at the moment.
Right.
Well, I guess one controversial one is that the debate between socionics and MBTI doesn't matter.
Right. I figured
that's one.
But yeah, it's just like, okay.
Yeah. I actually feel that way about a lot of debates that are going on. Like, the debate doesn't matter. All that. This ties into the explaining a viewpoint from both sides as well. Like, people debate things that either doesn't matter or they're not understanding each other's arguments or etc. That's not something people would react to as me having an opinion of, but so not related to this question, but
Gotcha. Okay. And would you say that your thoughts define who you are?
No.
Cool.
I don't think so. No. Definitely not. I don't have much of development on that thought. It's just no.
No, that's perfect. All right. Okay, so I think they were pretty much done. Let me just make sure that I've crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's. Okay, actually, there is just one last final question. How are you like managing people?
In what context? Because I feel like I change that a lot depending on the context.
Like, are you one that is inclined to take lead or, and then be like, okay, and then kind of like facilitate things? Or are you one that's like a little bit more reluctant to do so, but then when you do it, you are capable?
Somewhere in the middle.
Mm.
Like, I don't mind doing it. I enjoy doing it, but I almost need a confirmation that it's okay that I do it.
Huh. And
Um, so I won't take charge unless it's, in most cases, I won't take charge unless it's something that would be not necessarily appreciated, but would be acceptable for the other people. I wouldn't want to push myself. I wouldn't push myself into being in charge
right.
if it's against what other people want.
Kind of, I totally forgot about this when I just asked, but just reminded me. Kind of like the whole, I think last year or the year before. Actually, I don't remember, but when we were having those like presidential campaigns on Twitter, it's like,
Yeah,
vote for me as president. And, and none of us really wanted to campaign because,
yeah. I'd be like, vote for me if you want to.
yeah, yeah. But then if, you guys all voted for me, well, I guess I'll step into that position and be, got you. And this is the actual final last question. How quick are you to hop into action? Like, would you say it's like, what would be the ratio between plan versus execute? So, okay, I plan up to 60%, and then the rest of the 40%, I execute, or I plan up to 90%, and 10% I execute. Like how's that been consistent over your life?
I don't think it has been consistent.
And you can tell me the inconsistencies throughout that as well.
Yeah. It's not like there's a trend in my life where at one period I do one thing and one period I do another.
Uh-huh.
But I have a tendency to plan for too long. It's something I want to work on, but I'll also find myself not knowing how to do something and throwing myself into it and be like, well, I'll figure it out.
Okay.
Driving was like that to an extent. Not like I threw myself into a car and drove on the highway without knowing anything, but
Uh-huh.
I learned by doing it. Um, when I started the first blog, I didn't know how to do it at all. I started it and sort of figured it out as I went. But then I planned for a long time with the moving from WordPress to the self-hosted one. That I planned for a long time.
Like how long?
So it's not really consistent.
How long did you plan that?
Don't remember. Too long?
Okay.
Not too long, but I had the thought for quite a while that like, okay, I want to do this, and then I did too much about like wanting to research it, wanting to understand it before I jumped into it.
Okay.
But like I said, that's true, and at the same time, I'll sometimes know that I don't know how to do something, but nothing will happen if I don't do it. I'll just try.
Okay. I feel like I'm pretty confident in what type you are, but I also like questions just keep on coming to mind as you say more. And I'm like, kind of excited because it's like we do get to talk often, but this is like a setting where it's like I get to just ask everything. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead if you have more questions.
awesome. Another question that I have for you is that when you get really, really, really stressed out, how are you like?
Very to the point.
Very to the point. Okay.
Very to the point. I'd rather not be involved with people when I'm stressed, because I'm like, especially not if I'm in charge of people.
Sorry.
Then I have,
No, that's just my email. Sorry.
because then I have a tendency to run over people almost. Not run over, because it's almost like the ESTJ thing where I thought I ran people over, but I didn't. So I'm still like inclined not to do it, but I feel like I'm more direct and more rough with people than I'd want to, even if it's not like super bad, but it's more than I'd want to. I'm very, very solution focused. Like I sort of divide my mind into, okay, we'll put all the everything aside and just focus on getting this done. Then I'll be less stressed, and then I can focus on this that is important, but I can't do now because I'm stressed.
Okay. Cool. Are you ever sensory indulgent? You ever like felt that way?
Oh, not really. Could you describe specifically what you mean to? Because I feel like that's a phrase that gets thrown around without people like actually defining it.
I mean, I don't imagine you to be someone who just tries to go find someone to go like sleep with or go get drunk. But like, do you like find like ways to like just escape from your situation and just kind of like distract yourself from whatever is going on? Or would you see yourself as someone who just gets like your emotions just become like extremely flared and now you're just like, which I feel like is what you're leaning toward, and you're just like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards that. I do have it's not really stress, but it's like de-stressing with the rugby, where I can put my mind aside and just focus on what's present. And in that, I can de-stress. I can not focus on all that I'm thinking about, all the emotions, and for 2 hours, just put them aside, do something else entirely, something physical, and I can then return to it when I'm fresh, when I've been away from it for a while, when I've exhausted my mind. So that could be something similar, even if it's more before the stress hits than during it. But I think the stress itself is more emotional, even if, yeah, more emotional probably, even if it's more retracting the emotions. Like if I'm stressed, it's not like I throw my emotions around. I retract them and get to the point.
Got it. Okay. All right. I'm just making sure that I don't have anything else I want to ask before I go over everything. Are you more prone to overplan or To hop into action. I know that you said that it's like both, but which one do you feel like you have an inclination toward?
Hopping into action, although I wouldn't phrase it that way.
Okay.
But I'm more likely not to plan.
Okay.
Like tendency to wing it almost.
Gotcha.
With a lot of presentations I had in university before I studied philosophy, I had I had what I wanted to say, and it wasn't something my life depended on. So I just thought, I'll wing it. And I think that is in a lot of cases. I trust my ability to make it up in the moment.
Gotcha.
So I'll not plan too much and just do it anyway.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. And would you say that your focus is more on your external world or your focus is more on your internal world? Of
I
course,
don't know.
with the caveat that we have an inclination toward both. But do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've had a habit of saying the external world in an unreflected way because I was told I was an ESTJ and I always went with it after that.
Right.
But at the same time, I've for a long time now said that I think if Jung would type me, he would type me as an introvert. So I'm not sure, but I would probably lean towards I think I would lean towards saying the internal world, even if it's like toss up or like it's not something I'm like this, but it's kind of vague, kind of probably leaning the internal world.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. So I'm done. And I'm about to explain what type that I think that you are and everything. But what type do you think that I'm going to type you as based off of all
I don't know. I've tried to keep it in mind, like trying to guess which you come up to with, and I've sort of when I answered one question, I'm like, you'll probably type me as an ENTJ, and then next question, you'll probably type me as an INTJ, and vice versa, like flopping between those two all the time. I'm guessing it's one of them. Like I am not sure which one.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, yeah, you're pretty much right. Oh, dang. I was actually supposed to play with you and say that I typed you as an ESFP.
I would have loved that. That's one of the types I've never been typed at. I would love that.
Right. Like, there's no way that you are an ESFP. But I believe that you are an ENTJ.
Okay.
And the reason why I believe so is because I think that obviously it was a difficult case because I was trying to. I went into this like trying to make sure that whatever type that you were I threw away like every possibility and everything, but everything seemed to point toward intuition, especially with your relationship with your body and all of that, and then also like your affinity toward like reading. And despite being a TE user, then you still seem to have like more of like impractical things that are in mind. But the way that you describe your relationship with your body, I feel like SE inferior types would not have that much of an affinity. Now, granted, it's still like tertiary. And so, you still have some type of like disconnect with it. But the way that you jump into it, like even in the flow question that I asked at the beginning, how rugby was one of the answers that you gave. I feel like an SE inferior type would not would not say such a thing. And again, you had specific reasons behind that, but I feel like that's still something's like, yeah, even if I wouldn't grow exhausted, I still would not prefer to do that. So there's that. There were some things that I was like looking at that I was like, okay, this is a little bit tricky, because I was trying to then tease out like, okay, is this man tertiary FI or tertiary SE? Um, and some of the questions was like, which do you feel more close to, your body or your emotions? And from what you said, you pretty much said that it's your emotions that matter the most. And to me, that also kind of sounded like TE as well. And so, of course, like from one standpoint, it could seem like, oh, my emotions matter the most. Okay, tertiary FI. But I think that's more of like an aspiration function for you, which happens to be our 3-year-old, our inferior function, while our tertiary function is one that we usually go to in times of play. And then also our inferior function is often one that we may go to like when we get like extremely stressed out. And the fact that you started talking about how like you get like really short, like you're not super like sensory indulgent and everything, because you have a more mature SE tertiary, while with INTJs that I've like, asked that question to, maybe with the exception of like 2 out of several that I've profiled, they'd all be like, oh yeah, man, I used to do this and I used to do that, and they kind of like had like reflections, while for you, it's just more of like, okay, now my feelings are starting to boil, and I'm becoming very cold. And then it gets into this whole TEFI thing where it's like, okay, now I just want to compartmentalize, execute, and stuff like that. I'm very matter of fact, I'm very short. And so I think that's actually like a inferior introverted judging function that's going on over there, as opposed to like, an extroverted extroverted sensing function that's going on. When I asked about alone time, you said that you would like, miss the people. And again, I know that's an extreme. There's always going to be like, there's going to be introverts who would also say like, they miss the people and everything. But it's me putting all of what you said throughout this session together, and it makes me lean toward an extrovert, and like the consistency, like more often, like you had more tally marks for things that extroverts would say, and that extroverted sensation, and so, yeah, sure, I enjoy reading, and, I enjoy doing this, I enjoy doing that, which, by the way, you have a very good TE and I combo going on over there. Like, it seems like you have good centering and you're very balanced. And so that's good. Some people probably use the term like ambivert for you and everything, when in actuality, in my opinion, it just means like you've integrated your other functions very well. And this also goes back to, like your younger days and everything, where you said that you were like a little bit more like expressive and everything. And I am obviously like theorizing, but I believe that it was more of your SE, your tertiary SE, that was making you be like a little bit more expressive and, stuff like that. And that, like, I wouldn't necessarily, it made you like come off more as like, maybe, I don't know, like, because I don't really know how exactly you were, but some of the things that you had said were, so you were curious, you were reading early and everything, and you were just like more open, warm, and you would not describe yourself as like cold. And I think that was because maybe you were more outgoing. Again, you weren't, that doesn't mean necessarily that you were like boisterous in a way, but that tertiary SE was probably like making you just like a little bit more like outgoing in that sense. And then when you started becoming more cold and all of that, I think that not only was that FI suppression, but I think that was also you trying to kind of, in a way, go against what the external world was putting at you, such as your family, while also still kind of conforming to the external world, almost in a way that you couldn't really escape. And then you start explaining about how your father was even trying to tell you, like, this isn't even really you. This isn't even really you. But your FI inferior is like, oh, what does he know? You know, like, no, this is me. But and you're trying to go against that in a way. But then later on, as you continue to develop, then you realize, like I'm thinking of the movie Inside Out. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you remember how, like, sadness, I often see her as like the inferior function, and joy is the dominant function. And sadness eventually was like integrated into the group. Like, she was there before, but everyone was just kind of like about her and everything. And it wasn't until she disappeared, and then her and Joy had this whole rendezvous and everything, and they come back, that they now see how she was important. And I feel like that's the part of your life that you're in right now, which if you were, you know, if this was like a tertiary function for you, I feel like you would have realized this a lot sooner. But now it seems more of like an aspiration for you. And that's why you're like continuing to go into it, which is kind of like how I feel about TI, even, you know, as an ENFJ. Like, when you ask me like SE tertiary questions, like, I will respond pretty much in the same way as you would. But I'd be like, oh yeah, you know, SE, like, that's fun, you know, yeah, this is that. But I'm really trying to get to the TI. And that's the thing that we tend to kind of brag about often too. Be like, so I know an INTJ who, she's actually one of the certification professors, and she's the main certification professor in personality hacker and everything. And she was telling us a story. She was like, if you were to like be profiling her and you asked her like her relationship with her body and everything, she was asking about how like the importance of like asking certain questions and like the whys behind it is just very vital. Because for her as an INTJ, she might tell you something like so if you ask like, oh, so you know, how conceptual are you? And, oh yeah, you know, I'm pretty conceptual and I can do this, but I went rollerblading the other day and I was so good at it. And like, they just start like getting like very excited about that. But then she says, like, if you ask further questions, you'd realize that, you know, my SE son, he was rollerblading like all around and everything. But for me, I was just rollerblading in a little circle, and I was proud of myself. And it's like, oh, so that's like SE inferior, like kind of like bragging on itself in a way, like, oh wow, look at me, I did this. While like if you ask about the higher up functions, we don't often take as much pride in that, because it's like, I mean, yeah, you know, oh yeah, I guess I am kind of good at that, you know, oh yeah, you know, I'm pretty good at like managing people, but I mean, hey, it is what it is. But my feelings though, this poetry that I've been writing, like, you know, and this is that, we tend to flex that a little bit more, because that's what we've been like curating and working on. And so that's what I'm getting from this profiling session. I feel like that's what you've been working on, especially in your case where you've suppressed it so much growing up. And so now, as people continue to try to suppress that on you, and I feel like, again, we've had like a little bit of conversations about this too, like how, you know, like, I remember when I first came into the MBTI community on Twitter and everything, I used to literally tell Jamila, I was like, man, like, Johannes is cool and everything, but he's like a robot. like I pictured you laughing like, ha, ha, ha. And it was just like, and again, I never had a problem with you, but I just think to myself, like, I feel like this is so staged. Like, why? But maybe he really is just that emotionless. I don't know which one would be worse. Like, just let yourself go, man. If you want to laugh, laugh. If you want to express, then express. And over the years, now it's like I've been seeing tweets and stuff. It's like, wow, he just keeps on expressing now. I just see like the random poetry that you'll like post and everything, and musings, and it's like, wow, this is so fascinating. Like, at once upon a time when somebody thought that you were an ISFP, I was like, Johannes? Okay. And now it's like, I mean, I don't believe that you're an ISFP, but I can see how somebody would get those functions reversed now. and think that you're an ISFP, and it's because of that affinity toward that, inferior function. Now, like you're bringing that out a lot more, almost like, again, like how I do maybe on my YouTube channel and on my Twitter, where I'm just bringing out a whole bunch more of my thoughts. Because growing up, I just went along with what everybody else was saying. I didn't really think for myself in a way. I just kind of was like, okay. And now it's like, hold on, no. I want to know what I really think about Christianity. I want to know what I really think about the system. I want to know why this. I want to know why that. And I'm still going to be asking what other people think, because I'm going to sharpen my thinking based off of that. There's got to be like a balance. But I'm not just going to go with what you think. I'm going to sharpen that. And now it's like, hey, guys, look at me. I thought this through. Look at this thread. I thought this through. That's my way of like bragging on my inferior function. And so lastly, controversial thoughts. So, of course, this is not an absolute thing, but it's a pattern that me and my classmates for my profiling certification have noticed. TEFI users, which was funny because you fell right in line with that. That was another way that I confirmed, like, okay, yeah, TEFI. TEFI users, usually when they're asked that question of like controversial opinions and stuff, they don't really have like a controversial opinion that'll cause outrage, societal outrage. Like usually it's more just like kind of like what you said. You're like, I mean, I'd have to like kind of like think about that, but like usually it's just more of just like oh man, like, oh, that's your value kind of thing. Like, okay, I guess, whatever. It'd just be like, oh, that kind of sucks, but whatever. But then a TIFE person, they usually have like what we see as like controversial opinions, such as like Jordan Peterson. He finally voices something and everyone's like, what? And there's the way that they like think, because it's like directly influencing like that FETI, like that directly like influences what we as a society already believe. What do you mean it's okay to cheat and do this? Or what do you mean that we should see masculinity more and like this way? All of these, there's a whole bunch of like different thoughts that I've seen. But usually TIFE, that polarity is the one that's kind of like, because they're always looking at society, especially like higher TI users, and they're like poking at stupid things that society does, kind of like comedians often do, then they can be like the quickest to be quote unquote canceled or something, because the whole FE culture, especially SFJ culture and traditional culture in that way, it's just like, what the heck? Why are you trying to like revolutionize this society in this way? Or like, why are you poking holes in what we believe as a society? We have to mute that person. We have to mute that voice. While with TEFI, they're usually just kind of like doing their own thing. And it like whatever I'm doing or not doing doesn't really have to influence you guys as much, which doesn't mean that you guys don't influence, of course, because y'all definitely do, but it's in a different type of way of influence. I think that FETI, which I'm going to be doing a video about this eventually, but I see FETI as more thought inception or calibration of thoughts, versus TEFI is more of embodying what they believe is, should be done. That TEFI is like, okay, I'm gonna just execute it. I'm gonna just be about it, and I'll just embody that. I don't have to really say much. So yeah, that's why I believe that you are TEFI rather than FETI. And I have like, there's like a whole bunch of pages here, things about how you say like, what's obvious and everything, which I guess we won't get into. But yeah, long story short, and if you want, probably like after this video, then I can send you a voice text explaining a little bit more if you have any more questions and stuff. But long story short, like I believe that you're an ENTJ, and this is why. Would you Do you have any comments, disagreements, agreements, anything like that?
I have some comments. Can I make them after a quick bathroom break?
Yeah.
That'd be cool. I'll be back in a second.
Sure, no problem. And during this scene, I'm wondering if I should eat my late breakfast on camera, as we are now pretty much done with the profiling session, or if I should just wait until he gets back. What you're witnessing right now is me stalling until he gets back. So I'll continue to talk into the camera. Should I do impersonations? Should I speak of some of the controversial opinions that I have? No. Should I? I don't even know. I'm trying to like talk nonstop, but I don't even know what to say. But let's just say this. That was actually kind of difficult. I mean, it'd be easier if it were in person. And I'd probably beat the dead horse until there's just clear distinction of, okay, you are T dominant, not NI dominant. You are an extrovert, not an introvert. You have SE tertiary, not FI tertiary. So that's more of what I'd probably do in this session. But I feel like I'd gathered enough information about that. And what he had said about SE versus FI and his upbringing and all of that just already made sense. And for those of you who don't know, Johannes had already typed out as an ENTJ previously. And I did come into this, like, of course, I didn't forget that he already types out as an ENTJ, but I also wasn't trying to prove that he was any type. I was genuinely being open to any type that he possibly could have been, which would have been ISFP, ENFJ, whatever. So, yeah, I was just stalling until you got back and explaining the process. And I also kind of informed everyone who could be watching that you had already tested out as ENTJ, or you were identifying as ENTJ previously. But yeah, so what were your comments though?
The first one is the problem I have with ENTJ typing, I guess. In that I don't relate to a lot of the descriptions, a lot of the actual ENTJs, and a lot of the fictional examples of ENTJs when they're a lot more aggressive, a lot more commanding, a lot more pushing.
Right.
And a lot more repressive of emotions. Like my high school self, I definitely related to the ESTJ, but the ETJ sort of personality. But a lot of that I feel like I don't relate to anymore. And I wouldn't I wouldn't see myself as my high school self at all. I'd barely get along with my high school self because of all this pushiness, commandingness, that all the descriptions of ENTJs and a lot of the people that are ENTJs are so focused on.
For sure. I made a video on my channel. So right now I'm doing the whole celebrity typing series. But before that, I made a series called How to Identify Each Type, both in fiction and in real life. And I believe, I don't really remember what I said in the ENTJ one, but I'm almost positive that I addressed that, because that's a huge thing that I've realized when it comes to especially ENTJs and possibly ENJs in general. We have such as a society, we have such a skewed version of a perspective of what extroversion versus introversion is. And it's actually to the point where it's incredibly like just very annoying. Like there's so many profiling sessions that I'll do, and the person would have thought like for sure they were introvert, and then when I explain to them that they're an extrovert, when I tell them they're an extrovert, and I explain to them how they're an extrovert based off of the functions and everything, as opposed to like stereotypes and stuff, they're like, whoa. And I'm explaining to them like, yeah, like regardless, like you don't have SE as an inferior function. So yeah, sure, but I'm more reserved. You are, but that doesn't mean that extroverts can't be, and in fact, more matured ones that have developed their auxiliary, that's how it comes. But at the end of the day, that inferior function is never going to be as strong as your tertiary function. And once I start poking at the tertiary versus the inferior, you're always going to know if the person's an extrovert or introvert. So we should not focus on how boisterous the person is. I've met INFPs that will talk your ear off. I've also met INFPs who are incredibly silent. And then I've met ENFPs who will talk your ear off. And I've met ENFPs who are usually reserved. Like I think that Kanye West, he kind of even does both. I believe personally that he's ENFP. And he can like in interviews and stuff like that. But then also like when you see him, then he's just usually like cold. He doesn't even really want to smile a lot of times and stuff like that. It's like, oh, Kanye has to be an introvert. He's an INTJ. No, like we have to look at the functions that are being used. And so in your case, I definitely agree, especially when I first got into type. I saw ENTJs as the stereotypical, and again, that's even still stereotype, but the stereotypical 8-wing 7 Enneagram, where it's just like very assertive and probably the sexual 8-wing 7, like just extremely assertive, like you can't, chain me kind of thing. Like, what did you try to challenge me type of energy. And so anyone that I would kind of see acting that way, I would kind of be like, I don't like ENTJs. I had a very strong distaste for them. And so that's why it even surprised me when I come across you in the type community and you were identifying as one. I was like, what? Like, is he really? And whenever I come across like anomalies like that, then I start to think to myself like, okay, either I should make room in my internal file cabinet for this nuance of the type, or maybe I'm just misunderstanding the type altogether. Maybe I've even mistyped certain INTJs in my head as, certain ENTJs in my head as INTJs because of this. But here's one who knows that he's an ENTJ, and then here it is. And I've been realizing that even for myself as an ENFJ. Are there ENFJs who are out there who are more boisterous and, pushy and stuff like that? As someone commented on one of my videos, like, well, if you're an ENFJ, you're supposed to be pushy. What are you talking about? It's like, yeah, I don't believe Professor Xavier is an ENFJ because he's not pushy. He's actually introspective. What? These stereotypes are so polluting. And that's why, so in my How to Identify series, I try to put so much emphasis on the cognitive functions rather than behavior. And throughout this whole profiling session, sure, energy gives a lot too. But I was focused on what functions are you most comfortable with? What functions are you exuding? That's what will make me define someone's type, not how necessarily they're behaving. Because I know people who are different types completely, and they behave exactly the same. And then I know people of the same type. They're using the same function, the same function stacking, and they don't look alike. But what makes us an individual is how we use our functions. And so you as Johannes, sure, in my opinion, you are an ENTJ. But the way that you use TE is in a way that only Johannes pretty much uses TE. The way that you use NI is in a way that only Johannes uses NI, and so forth and so forth. And that's what makes you an individual. But at the end of the day, you're an ENTJ because you still use those functions in that order. You still have tertiary SE. And as long as you have that tertiary SE, according to Myers-Briggs, you have to be either ENFJ or ENTJ. And you're not ENFJ, because I'm seeing definitely TEFI. Oh, but he's nice. So, but he's talking about his feelings. Okay. Like but if you look at it, again, the function, that polarity is a TEFI polarity as opposed to like FETI polarity. And so therefore just kind of like induces in all parts. And then we looked at your earlier life and all of that, and we now see, and a lot of times I feel like TE dominants, they notice like me acting this way is not getting me results. And TE, at least in Myers-Briggs, is all about results. So if I'm not getting the results that I want, whether it be my image or whether it be me executing this plan, whatever it is, I'm going to switch it up. And TE users who are just more TESE oriented and not really introspective, or ENTJs that are more TESE oriented and not really introspective, they won't really review like, there's a pattern that whenever I start barking at people, I'm not really getting what I want as much. And so, maybe I should probably stop doing that, but it seems like you're someone who, even from an earlier age, you already had that reflection. And so you never even went in that direction. Or when you did as an ESTJ, even then you were most likely like you were just more cold, but you weren't necessarily like bossy or like, pushy in that manner. And so, yeah, all that to say that this is actually something that I'm trying to work on. I'm trying to get people to stop falling into stereotypes. And you are definitely not the stereotypical ENTJ. But I also want to make it clear that there are a lot of ENTJs out there who are like Johannes, for those of you who are watching. And I always mention the show Graceland. For those of you who are watching, y'all can check it out on Hulu. My favorite ENTJ character of all time. He's actually one of my favorite characters, fictional characters of all time. Like every single show, movie, whatever that I've watched ever, if I had to nail down like 5 top favorite fictional characters, he would be in my top 5. And I believe that he's an ENTJ. His name is Paul Briggs. I admire him. He's awesome. He is not like your stereotypical ENTJ. In fact, I think that online people would type him as an INTJ. And it's like, dude, no, his tertiary SE is there. And yeah, but he's not like in that way, like, like how most people would see an ENTJ as. So that's my spiel. In defense for you, that if people kind of like nail that, oh, he's an ENTJ, well, why is he coming off in that way? Like, well, pay attention more to the functions rather than his behavior. And we should probably do that for every type. That's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, makes sense. Is there anything that pointed specifically to dominant thinking or dominant TE over intuition or NI, or is it based on the SEFI?
Honestly speaking, my conclusion came down to SEFI differencing, because the dominant TE, dominant NI was very, it was kind of like hard. And I've even had like ENFJs or NFJs that I couldn't really tell, because they had developed both of their two higher functions so well that it's like, dang, I have to go to the tertiary and inferior. And the question that I ended up asking them a lot of times was like, do you get more enjoyment from exploring other people's minds or from exploring your own mind? And INFJs, at least so far from what I've been typing everything, although there's an affinity to both, especially when they're more highly developed and everything, INFJs enjoy exploring their own mind more, while ENFJs enjoy exploring other people's mind more. That's because that NI is serving the FE. And so they're like, me exploring the other person's mind is serving my FE desire to connect with people. While for the INFJ, it's like, I do like connecting with people. And so I also will engage in exploring other people's mind. But I think that I push more toward exploring my own mind, seeing the own patterns in my own head. kind of thing. It's like, okay, so that's how I like distinguish if it really comes down to it. And then of course that's when I start poking at tertiary TI or tertiary SE for them. For you, personally, I'm still trying to come up with questions that will be kind of as definite as that NFJ one. Sorry about that. But when I asked about, like, you're focused on the external world, and then I observed, like, like, again, like your upbringing and all of that, it just also seemed to me more extroverted. But the more introverted tendencies were kind of like imposed upon you in a way. That's how it was looking like for me. And especially how you said, like, people almost like invalidated how you felt. A lot of times you're like, oh, what was it? Something that you said. You said you're drawn to your emotions. I, for some reason, do not include joy and anger because they're more instinctive. People respond to my expression of emotion or inexpression rather than the emotion itself. That was like, and that being your inferior, in my opinion, and then you being like a TE Dom, then again, you are looking at what is getting me results, especially in the external world. That's how I was seeing it. And so then it's like, so like you're kind of like, if you guys are not even paying attention to this, and this is my inferior function, why the heck am I bringing it out to you guys at all? Because y'all are not validating it in the way that I'd like for you to. So no, I'm not going to bring this out to you. I'm going to hide it away, and that caused you to be like more, but then you'd end up like seeing like, I get more results maybe when I'm colder in this way and such. But then you go to the military, or you try to sign up for the military, and something that was not obvious to you, but now you look back in hindsight and you're like, oh wow, this was kind of obvious, is you're like, dang, well, duh, Johannes. I mean, why wouldn't I think that being emotionless in a way and, suppressing my emotions was going to keep me from getting into the military? Wow, that did not give me the results I wanted. And I've been looking forward to this for so long. I should have probably thought that through a little bit more. Then on top of that, when I had asked you, like, which one are you more inclined to do at the end, which I was still continuing just trying to like make sure, because I was already like leaning on ENTJ, but I was like, I want to make sure, and you said that you were more inclined to kind of like wing it. And again, your top two functions are more balanced. And so even though you're more inclined to wing it, you're not going to do that, but if it has to come to it and we're putting a tally mark for each time, it seems like you were pretty much saying like, I'm comfortable again with that tertiary SE and my dominant TE. I'm pretty comfortable enough with the external world to just kind of like stumble my way through and kind of like figure this out. But at the same time, I still also have a like necessity to like overplan. And again, lastly, I don't want to integrate this too much and I didn't use this in my typing of you, but I think that a lot of other things that are contributing to even the stereotypical ENTJ versus how you are and stuff like that is for those of you who don't know, Johannes is a Enneagram 5. So just like my friend David, who's an INFJ, I look at his functions and I know for sure, like this man, he has TI in his stack. It's not TE, it is TI. So even though sometimes like people that commented on some of his videos, they're like, what kind of INFJ is he? Like, are you sure he's not INTJ? And I'm like, no, trust me, he has TI in his stack. So even though we might not be able to see the FE as much, or in the stereotypical sense, I see the TI very clearly, and I also see the NI. So this makes sense. And he's a 5 as well. So, and he's a male, so he's going to resonate more with that TI side of him. And his FE comes out in his art and his like, how he influences society and stuff like that. So for you, when you started, like, talking about, how you can kind of like just like wing it and all of that, but you still tend to also have that over planning. I also think that, like, you being an Enneagram 5 is having a lot to do with that. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. It was something I got caught up on. Yeah, the result. Like, is this way of being granting me the result I want? I think that is more of a short-term solution for me.
With that?
Like, if this isn't getting me the result I want, that is a short-term solution. It's not something I would base my life on, or
Oh yeah, for sure not.
like it's something I do, but it's not something I focus on.
Okay.
And then this might not change the title at all, but when you talked about the TEFI and FETI and controversial opinions, you mentioned that TI, I think it was high TI, poked at or tried to find flaws in society.
Yeah.
Because I find myself doing that a lot, even if I don't always, or I do it a lot, but I don't express it as a controversial opinion. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of my Twitter has been about, like, here are flaws in society, here is where society is wrong, and a lot of my thoughts are on, like, on society and on here are the issues, but I don't express them as controversial opinions.
Yeah, and I don't think that higher TI users often do either. But so if I'm understanding correctly, because I'm actually subscribed to your Twitter, like every single tweet, every single tweet that you post for the past however many years, I get a notification on my phone just in case if I don't, go through my Twitter feed and everything. I don't want to miss things that you say because I find you to be insightful. And I only have done that for like, it's less than 10 people on all of Twitter. So yeah, and you've been on there for over a year or two. And your email list, which, people should subscribe to if they don't know. He writes very, very good emails talking about.
When I get around to write them.
Yeah. And so I think that when you express such opinions, I need to find a better way to put it. But it even still seems like it's coming from like a TEFI standpoint. Like you speak like very matter of fact. Like, oh, this is, it's just kind of like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not that you are not nuanced. I don't want to say that, but the way that I personally see TI users to be nuanced when they're addressing such things, that's where they would tend to get in trouble. While with you, it's more matter of fact and general, in a sense that people wouldn't really see it as something to get outraged about. And then on top of that, you cover it with a lot of philosophical language, such as like the anima and stuff like that. So then it's kind of just like people reading and they're probably just like, okay, as opposed to like, a higher TI user that's just like, I don't understand why the man has to pay for a woman when they're going out to dinner. Because actually, if you look back into society, the reason why the man did this is because this, that. What do you mean? So you're not a gentleman and yada, yada, yada? You might probably hold such an opinion, but I feel like the way that you phrase it on Twitter, if you were to voice that opinion at all, see it as important enough to voice, it wouldn't be something that you'd value enough to voice, nor if you did voice it in that way. I feel like you'd kind of put it in a matter-of-fact way that's not really going to cause people to be stirred up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's just like the pattern that I've noticed. And then the other people in my class have noticed, and we come back and we calibrate and stuff like that. But yeah. All in all, this has been really fun. Seriously, I have filled up my previous profiling book, this one and this one, and I was in another notebook of mine. And Jamila actually, she found this notebook yesterday, and she put this on there and everything, and she's like, hey, you can like use this for coaching. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so you were actually the first one that I've profiled in this book. And so I don't know how sentimental that is, but I think that's pretty cool. And it's actually like, this has been really awesome to, get to better understand you, understand your development through life, the way that you think about things. And I really appreciate you sitting down and doing this with me, man. Like, there's going to be more to talk about for sure, especially like as I go back and like I think about it. And thanks for also being open to being recorded and everything. Hopefully as I show this, and maybe over time as my channel grows more and everything, people will now start to see more of that example of like, oh, let's not write off ENTJs as INTJs so quickly. Let's see that there are the types of stereotypical ENTJs. We're not saying they're not, but there's more of a spectrum than we might think. And let's pay more attention to what functions are being used in what order. So then we'll have more people like paying more attention before they're just like, oh yeah, that person's definitely an extrovert, or that person's definitely an introvert kind of thing. But yeah, do you have any last shout outs? Like how to follow, what your Twitter would be. I'm going to put all of this in the description as well, but anything that you want to put out into the world.
My Twitter and my email list, I guess. That's about it.
All right, cool. Sounds good. So yeah, you guys can definitely follow Johannes on Twitter, engage with him. He's pretty open to discussion. And like I said, subscribe to his email list. I'll be putting a link in description in the comments section and also in the description and stuff like that. But yeah, thanks again, Johannes. I'm assuming that it's getting pretty late over there. So
it's getting a bit darker at least.
Yeah, dark, exactly. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop now and let y'all go. Done.